The first thing I saw after my husband pushed me down the stairs wasn't the ceiling spinning or the white-hot flash of pain. It was my sister's smile, a serene, satisfied little curve of her lips as she watched from the top of the landing. He said I was faking it, the pregnancy, the symptoms, the hope that had been slowly rebuilding inside me. He called my fall a trip, a clumsy accident. But what if the worst part isn't the betrayal you can prove, but the silent, shared understanding between your abusers? The way everyone in the room looked away, the way her laughter, light and musical, had echoed in the hallway just moments before. What kind of family demands a test of your truth, then orchestrates the verdict? And when they finally believe you, when the blood and the sirens confirm what you've been saying all along, is it already too late? Let me tell you what happened, and you can decide for yourself. I hadn't held a positive pregnancy test in my hands for nearly a year. The last one had sent me into a 3-hour spiral of grief in the upstairs bathroom of our quiet home in Beacon Hills, Oregon. I'd wrapped myself in a thick towel as if it could shield me from the devastating certainty of that single pink line. But this time, there were two. Faint, ethereal, but undeniably there. I didn't shout. I didn't weep. I just sat on the cold porcelain edge of the tub, the autumn sunlight slanting across the tiled floor, and stared at those two lines until they seemed to burn into my vision. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with a fragile, terrifying emotion I thought I had buried long ago. Hope. After 3 years of invasive treatments, 1 soul-crushing surgery, and Julian's final weary declaration, maybe we're just not meant to be parents, Alara. I was pregnant. Really, truly pregnant. But I didn't tell him. Not yet. I told myself it was for practical reasons. I wanted to wait for the doctor's confirmation to protect this delicate new beginning from the world's weight until it felt strong enough to bear it. But the truth, the one that coiled in my gut, was that I wasn't ready for his reaction, or worse, his meticulously practiced indifference. Julian came home early that evening, his footsteps heavy on the porch. The warmth that once radiated from him, the easy spark in his eyes, had long since been extinguished. He mumbled something about a canceled meeting, tossed his keys into the ceramic bowl on the entryway table with a clatter that felt unnaturally loud, and asked if dinner was ready. I nodded and served the leftover chili from the night before. We ate in a silence that was thick and suffocating. "You okay?" I finally ventured, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. He glanced up from his bowl, his eyes flicking over my face before dropping again. "Fine. Just tired." No kiss on the forehead, no reassuring hand on the small of my back. He stood before I had even finished eating and disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone with the ghosts of 1,000 happier meals. The next morning, I cleaned. It was my coping mechanism, the way I brought order to my world when my mind was in chaos. While folding a load of laundry, I reached into my purse for my grocery list, and my fingers brushed against something alien, a small, smooth, cool object tucked deep in an inner pocket. I pulled it out. It was a tiny black device, no bigger than a stick of gum, with a single minuscule lens, a recorder. My heart didn't just drop. It plummeted, cold and heavy, into the pit of my stomach. I stared at it, my breath caught in my lungs, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. He put this here, or did he? I sank to the floor, clean t-shirts and socks pooling around me like a soft barricade, my mind racing through the past few days, trying to pinpoint a moment my purse had been left unattended. Was I being paranoid? Had Julian mentioned some new piece of work-related tech? I couldn't remember. But the deliberate placement, hidden within the lining of my most personal space, felt like a violation. I tucked it back into the pocket, my hand shaking. I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. By Friday, Julian's demeanor had shifted from indifference to a strange, unnerving attentiveness. It wasn't affection. It was observation. He watched me with the intensity of a scientist studying a specimen. At breakfast, he casually asked, "Don't you have that OB checkup thing coming up soon?" I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. "How did you know about that?" The question was out before I could stop it, sharp and defensive. "You put everything on the fridge calendar, Elara," he said smoothly, pouring himself more coffee. "I didn't. I never put my medical appointments on there." He offered no reply, just a slight, knowing tilt of his head. At lunch, I made myself a decaf, a small, secret nod to the new life inside me. He raised a single eyebrow. "Going soft on the caffeine now?" I forced a brittle laugh. "Just trying to sleep better." He nodded, but his eyes followed the mug to my lips, as if he were testing a theory he already knew the answer to. That night, lying in the sterile quiet of our shared bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought of the last time I had been in this position, a woman on the precipice of motherhood. When the first pregnancy had ended, Julian had held me for a moment, his pats on my back feeling more perfunctory than comforting. The next morning, his words had been sharp and final. "Let's not tell anyone." It's embarrassing enough. And now, here I was again, carrying a secret that felt both miraculous and terrifying, and the man beside me was a stranger. On Saturday morning, my sister called. Serafina always called at the most inconvenient times, her voice a cascade of saccharine sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "Hey, big sis, what are you up to next Friday? Mom and Dad want to do a little family dinner, just us." I hesitated, searching for a plausible excuse. "I might have something for work." Liar. She laughed, a sound like glittering shards of glass. "You work from home, Elara. You're probably in your pajamas right now." A thin smile touched my lips. "You sound different," she continued, her tone shifting into a playful tease. "I don't know. Heavier?" I forced a chuckle. "Just tired. Come anyway. Everyone's been asking about you. Julian, too." We hung up after a few more empty pleasantries. I sat still for a long time, the phone resting on my lap, my own pulse a frantic drumbeat in my throat. That night, after Julian retired to bed early with a claimed migraine, I curled up on the living room couch, my hand resting instinctively over my stomach. "I hope," I whispered into the silent, shadowed room, "that this time they believe you exist." From the darkness of the upstairs hallway, Julian watched me, his expression as unreadable as a blank page. By the time Friday rolled around, the lines on the pregnancy tests I'd been taking daily had darkened to a bold, undeniable declaration. I had a doctor's appointment scheduled for the following Tuesday, but I hadn't breathed a word to anyone. The very thought of voicing my secret made my stomach clench with a familiar dread. Julian insisted we attend the family dinner, his reasoning clipped and logical. It would look weird if we skipped another one. I wanted nothing more than to stay home, to wrap myself in a blanket and guard my fragile joy, but I knew better than to argue when he was on a mission to maintain appearances. I chose my outfit carefully, a long, flowing cardigan over a blouse that hung just loosely enough to obscure the subtle changes I'd begun to notice in my reflection. The car ride to his parents' sprawling new house was silent. The radio remained off, and Julian's hands gripped the steering wheel with a white-knuckled intensity. I didn't ask why. As we pulled into the driveway, I had to consciously steady my breathing. The backyard was a portrait of manufactured warmth, strung with twinkle lights and filled with the soft strains of jazz music. A table laden with artisanal cheeses and expensive wine was already surrounded by familiar faces in crisp polos and pastel dresses. "Hey, look who decided to show up!" Julian's uncle bellowed as we stepped through the gate. His mother waved from the grill, tongs in one hand, a glass of Chardonnay in the other. Nothing about the scene was overtly threatening, yet my skin prickled with a sense of foreboding. Serafina arrived 15 minutes after us, fashionably late as always, clad in a stark white jumpsuit that screamed for attention. She moved through the crowd like a predator, her eyes scanning for the spotlight. She hugged me, holding on a moment too long, her lips brushing against my ear as she whispered, "You're glowing, Ilara. Must be something in the water, or in your belly." Before I could pull away, she pressed a small pink gift bag into my hands. On it, glittery letters spelled out, "For future little surprises." I stared at it, my pulse skipping a beat. She giggled, raising her voice so the nearby cousins could hear. "Just for laughs." You never know when a woman your age decides it's time to prove a point. I wanted the manicured lawn to swallow me whole. The evening became a blur of meaningless conversations. Questions about work, about home renovations, about a Napa trip we never intended to take. Julian was the perfect host, gliding between relatives with a practiced, easy charm. I lingered near the drinks table, sipping sparkling water and pretending it was something stronger. When I declined wine for the third time, Julian's mother tilted her head, her eyes sharp. "No Merlot for you tonight, dear. That's not like you." "She's been eating strange lately, too," Julian chimed in, his smile just a little too tight. "Cravings or something. Probably nothing." His tone was light, but it was laden with implication. I felt the eyes of the family turn towards me, the silent calculations beginning. Flustered, I fumbled for my purse to grab my phone, a nervous tick, and it slipped from my grasp, its contents spilling onto the wooden deck. And there it was, lying beside a tube of lipstick and a stray receipt, like a final verdict. My pregnancy test, the very first one I had taken, the one I had kept tucked away in a zippered side pocket. A collective gasp sliced through the murmured conversations. "Oh my God," Serafina said, her voice dripping with mock horror as she pressed a dramatic hand to her chest. "Are you seriously carrying that thing around like a trophy?" Someone snorted with laughter. An aunt whispered something to her husband. Julian bent down, picked it up, and turned it over in his hand. He looked directly at me, his eyes cold and flat. "This isn't new," he announced to the silent audience. "She's been keeping it for weeks. Don't read too much into it." I don't remember walking to the bathroom. I just remember the click of the door shutting behind me, enveloping me in a sudden, stark silence. The overhead lights were painfully bright, and the face staring back at me from the mirror was a pale, drawn stranger. I braced my palms on the cool marble of the sink and tried to breathe through the fire rising in my throat. Just 2 days ago, I had been holding on to something real and precious. Now, it felt as though it had been passed around, sullied by their suspicious, cynical hands. I hadn't told them because I couldn't bear the thought of grieving in public again. I had wanted this to be ours, mine, for just a little while longer, and they had stolen that from me. My palm drifted to my stomach in a silent apology, a promise I couldn't yet speak aloud. When I finally opened the bathroom door, Serafina was leaning against the hallway wall, arms crossed, her lips curled into a smirk. "Was that supposed to be your big reveal?" she asked, her eyes glittering with something that was not amusement, but triumph. I didn't answer. I didn't flinch. But deep inside me, something shifted. A piece of me broke off, and in its place, something cold, hard, and sharp began to form. The next morning, I woke to sunlight pouring through the blinds, an offensive brightness that did nothing to warm the chill that had settled deep in my bones. The other side of the bed was empty, the sheets cold. Julian had either left early or not come home at all. I didn't know which, and I didn't care. My body felt leaden, not just with the familiar weight of early pregnancy, but with a crushing heaviness in my chest, as if I'd slept with bricks piled on my ribs. The cruel slideshow of the previous night played on a loop behind my eyes, Serafina's smug smile, the gaudy pink gift bag, the casual way Julian had dismissed my pregnancy as a delusion. Downstairs, the suburban quiet felt mocking. I put a slice of bread in the toaster and stared at it, the hum of the heating elements the only sound in the house. When it popped up, I didn't bother with butter or jam. I just ate the dry, tasteless toast and poured myself a half cup of decaf. My doctor's voice echoed in my mind. Decaf is fine. And even that simple act felt like a secret I was failing to keep. I drifted into my office, the smallest room in the house, which we had once painted a cheerful, gender-neutral yellow for a nursery that never was. Now, the walls were a dusty, non-committal taupe. I hadn't been in here for months. Rummaging through a filing cabinet for an old receipt, my fingers brushed against the familiar worn leather of my old journal. I hadn't written in it since. I couldn't bring myself to finish the thought. I opened it, and a pink ribbon bookmark I didn't recognize fell out. It marked the page from the week I had lost our first baby. The entry was raw, unfiltered, the paper stained with a teardrop I didn't remember shedding. The ink in one paragraph was smeared, as if someone had run a thumb over the words while they were still wet. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe Julian is right. It's better we didn't tell anyone. The words were my own, a cracked version of myself trying to rationalize an unbearable grief. But what struck me now was how familiar they sounded coming from someone else. Serafina. At a brunch, 2 weeks after my miscarriage, she had laughed when I declined a mimosa, joking, "Well, looks like someone's resetting the clock early." At the time, I'd dismissed it as her usual brand of tactless cruelty. But now, seeing my own private words, I knew. She had read this. She had come by the house one afternoon to drop something off for Julian, claiming she wanted to check on me. She must have slipped into my office, gone through my things, and devoured my pain like a vulture. I felt a wave of nausea so powerful it buckled my knees. This wasn't hormones. This was betrayal. I closed the journal, my fingers tightening on the cover. "So that's how you knew," I whispered to the empty room. "That's how you knew exactly what to say." This wasn't a recent development. This was a pattern of behavior, a series of wounds disguised as jokes. She hadn't stumbled upon my vulnerability. She had sought it out and weaponized it. My heart thudded a new, steady rhythm as I walked back to the kitchen, grabbed my laptop, and opened a blank document. I wasn't writing for catharsis anymore. I was documenting. I was building a case. There was something about her smile as I'd left the bathroom that haunted me. It wasn't confusion or even pity. It was glee, pure, unadulterated satisfaction. That image was seared into my brain. After Julian left for a supposed run, I sat at the dining table and stared at the blinking cursor. My gaze drifted to the corner shelf, where the router for our home security system blinked a steady green. Julian had installed it for our safety, but he'd never given me the login credentials. I'd never thought to ask. Until now, I found the pamphlet with the customer ID in a junk drawer and called the support line. Within minutes, a cheerful technician had reset the password and emailed me temporary access. I navigated through the archive folders until I found the one labeled Backyard Cam, October 18th. My heart hammered against my ribs as the footage loaded. It showed Julian's mother arranging cheese platters, cousins laughing. Then, Serafina's grand entrance. I watched myself appear on screen, stiff and uncomfortable. The timestamp read 6:42 p.m. I fast-forwarded. At 7:03 p.m., I watched my purse fall. I paused, then scrolled ahead. At 7:04 p.m., the screen went black. Static. For exactly 2 hours. No audio, no motion, no error message. When the video feed returned at 9:04 p.m., Julian's uncle was helping his wife pack up folding chairs. The party was over. I sat back, my mouth dry. The exact window of time when the test was discovered, when Serafina made her scene, when I had hidden in the bathroom. Erased. A coincidence? No. not with Serafina's smirk still burned into my memory. I went upstairs, and Julian emerged from his office, a towel slung over his shoulder, his hair still damp. "Hey," he said casually. "Didn't expect you to be home." "I live here," I replied, my voice flat. "Right," he said with a tight laugh. "Just figured you'd go out or something." He saw me open my laptop, saw the security footage timeline on the screen. He appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing?" "Checking the cameras," I said, turning to face him. "Why is there a 2-hour gap in the video from the party?" His smile faltered. "Probably a power glitch. The system's old." "There was no outage, Julian." I checked the power company's reports for our area. Not even a flicker. The air between us grew cold and thin. "You're digging a lot lately, Alara," he said, his voice low. "That's not healthy." I didn't blink. Neither is hiding evidence. His nostrils flared almost imperceptibly. "I've got errands," he said, turning and walking away. The moment I heard his car pull out of the driveway, I was back at the computer. I exported the corrupted video file, gap and all, and saved it to an encrypted flash drive. Then I deleted the original from the local system. I held the small USB stick in my palm, its silver body cool against my skin. "If you think I'm bluffing," I whispered, the words sharp and final, "you're going to regret it." I didn't need any more confirmation. The missing footage, the carefully timed blackout, it was a choice. One of the many choices Julian and Serafina had made when they thought I wasn't watching. He was waiting in the living room when I came downstairs, already dressed for the Sunday brunch his parents always hosted. Slacks, a button-down, a splash of cologne that always made me sneeze. "You ready to go?" he asked, not looking up from his phone. I didn't answer, just grabbed my keys. The drive was silent, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, mine wrapped around the flash drive in my pocket. I didn't make it 10 feet into the house before he pulled me aside. "We need to talk," he said, his voice a low, sharp hiss. "I don't think now is the time," I replied, glancing towards the den where his mother was pouring wine. He gestured towards the grand, curving staircase. 2 minutes. I followed him to the midpoint landing. He turned to face me, his hands in his pockets. "So," he began, the corner of his mouth twitching, "are we going to keep pretending?" "Pretending what?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "That you're pregnant. That this isn't another one of your games to get attention." My blood ran cold. "Excuse me? You've done it before, Alara. Talked about symptoms, acted fragile, gotten everyone's hopes up for nothing." His eyes were flat, devoid of emotion. "That's not what happened," I whispered. He tilted his head, studying me like a bug under a microscope. "You need help." And then, in one smooth, deliberate motion, he placed his hand on my shoulder and pushed. It wasn't a violent shove. It was a calculated, precise movement. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on the edge of the plush carpet. My body twisted as I fell down the remaining 3 steps, a sharp, searing pain shooting up my spine as I landed awkwardly on my side. My elbow slammed against the bottom step, then my hip. The impact was jarring, but the pain wasn't just physical. It was the tearing sensation deep inside me. A scream caught in my throat, but never made it out. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my chest heaving, and then I heard it. From the hallway balcony above, a light, almost musical laugh. I turned my head. It was Serafina. She stood there, her face calm, her eyes fixed on me, as if she were watching the climax of a satisfying play. She didn't move. She didn't call for help. After what felt like an eternity, Julian descended the stairs slowly. "You tripped," he said, kneeling beside me, his voice suddenly laced with concern, a mask sliding perfectly back into place. He drove me to the emergency room in that same suffocating silence. At the hospital, under the flickering fluorescent lights, a young doctor finally delivered the news. "You were pregnant," she said softly, her eyes full of a pity I couldn't accept. "But I'm afraid the pregnancy didn't survive the fall." The world didn't spin. It just stopped. Later, alone in the recovery room, a kind older nurse came in to check my vitals. As she adjusted my IV, she hesitated, then lowered her voice. "You didn't just fall, did you, honey?" I stared at her, my mouth opening and closing with no sound. She simply nodded, as if I had answered. Back in the silence, I placed a hand over my now empty stomach. This time, it wasn't my body that had failed. It wasn't chance. It was him. And it was her. My phone lit up on the bedside table. A new message from Serafina. It was a single emoji, a smiling face. Morning came, slow and silent. Julian sat in the corner, scrolling through his phone as if he had somewhere better to be. When the nurse brought my discharge papers, she placed my personal items in a clear bag beside me. As I reached for my phone, I saw a small red dot blinking on the screen. The voice memo app. I'd forgotten I'd turned it on. My heart kicked once. I tapped the file. It was from my OB/GYN visit last month, the one Julian had insisted on attending. His voice, calm and rational, filled the quiet room. "I just want to understand, doctor. How can one really verify if a pregnancy is real? Some women exaggerate, for attention, for leverage." He had been planning this for weeks. I replayed the audio 3 times, letting the chill of it settle into my marrow. I walked out of that hospital, called a rideshare, and left him standing there, his fake smile finally faltering. Back in the house, I unlocked a filing cabinet and pulled out an old shoebox. Inside, I found it. A yellowing receipt for a purchase from a medical novelty website. Julian had once told me it was a prank for a Halloween party. I ran the item code through the site's archives. Fake ultrasound kits. He hadn't just doubted me, he'd prepared to discredit me. I laid the receipt next to my phone and began to write, documenting dates, conversations, Serafina's innocent jokes. A pattern emerged, not a sudden betrayal, but a slow, coordinated campaign to paint me as unstable. I photographed every piece of evidence and uploaded it to a secure cloud folder he didn't know existed. I titled it, "In Case They Come for Me Again." Then, my fingers trembling but steady, I sent a message to a name I hadn't spoken in years. Someone who had once told me, "If you ever need real help, not just a vent, call me. I'm ready if you are." The next day, my phone buzzed with a link from a friend. Serafina had posted a new blog entry, "When Family Turns Fiction, a sister's perspective on manipulation." She wrote about my history of exaggerating for sympathy, about my recent meltdown. She didn't use my name, but she didn't have to. The comment section was a sea of support for her. "You're so brave. Toxic siblings are the worst." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just closed the tab and made a call. Dr. Alistair, my physician, was sympathetic but firm. Julian's attorney had already contacted him, reminding him of confidentiality clauses. He believed me, but he couldn't put it in writing. So I took my folder, the one now labeled Ilara's War, and drove to the Women's Legal Aid Center downtown. I sat across from a volunteer named Ms. Diaz. I laid out everything, the receipt, the flash drive with the missing footage, the recording of Julian's conversation with the doctor. When I was finished, she asked me one question. "Do you want to handle this quietly, or do you want to make it public?" I met her gaze. Quiet didn't get me anywhere. I'm ready to set it on fire. By that afternoon, I had written and posted an anonymous op-ed titled, "Gaslit by Blood." I didn't name names, but the details were unmistakable. I included redacted screenshots of texts, a blurred image of the receipt, and a clip of Julian's voice asking, "Some women fake it, right?" I posted it to a private forum for women's rights advocates. By evening, it had over 30,000 views. Lawyers, therapists, journalists, strangers who didn't know my name but knew my story, were sharing it with outrage and empathy. At 6:02 p.m., Serafina posted a sun-drenched selfie on Instagram, sunshine and no regrets. 10 minutes later, the comments started to turn. "Wait, isn't this the sister from that gaslit by blood story? Hey, Serafina, care to comment? You looked a lot more confident before the receipts dropped." I watched the digital firestorm unfold with a stillness I didn't know I possessed. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. When Julian's mother texted, inviting me to a calm discussion dinner, I knew it was a rescue mission for the family image. I went, but I went prepared. The dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. Julian's father spoke of moving past this unfortunate business. His mother suggested therapy for my tendency to misinterpret things. Serafina sat across from me, smug and silent. Then I reached into my bag and placed the flash drive on the polished mahogany table. "What's that?" Julian asked, his smile brittle. "Proof," I said, my voice even. I told them what was on it. An email from Julian to his lawyer from weeks ago, asking how to handle a divorce in the event of a faked pregnancy claim. A line item in their estate plan reducing his financial obligation to zero if a pregnancy was disproven. And then I played the audio from my phone. His voice, cold and clear, echoed through the dining room. "If she keeps lying, maybe a fall will make her tell the truth." Serafina's fork clattered onto her plate. His mother covered her mouth. The silence was absolute. "This is ridiculous," Julian sputtered, standing up. "You're twisting everything." I stood too. "I'm not here for closure. I'm here because you don't get to rewrite my pain." I picked up my bag, left the flash drive on the table, and walked out. As the front door closed behind me, I heard the last thing I ever needed to hear from them. Serafina shouting at her brother, "I told you not to leave proof." Outside, the night air was cool and clean. My phone buzzed. My op-ed had been picked up by a national women's justice platform. The top comment read, "She didn't just survive. She fought like hell." The aftermath was a storm. Serafina posted a tearful, shaky video that backfired spectacularly. An anonymous email arrived from Leo, her ex-boyfriend. "Rowena, I know what happened that night. I know why she laughed. It's time someone told you what they tried to erase." Before I could reply, my doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Gable, my quiet neighbor from across the street. "I was at the party," she whispered, standing in my living room. "I saw him. I saw Julian push you. He waited for you to turn your back. He meant to do it." By noon, I was at my lawyer's office. "Now we have motive," I said. "We have a witness." And I have the receipts, literally. At the courthouse, as I filed the official complaint, my lawyer scanned the paperwork one last time. "You sure? Once we file this, their reputations, their careers, it'll all come crashing down." I looked him straight in the eye. They didn't think twice about mine. The divorce was swift. The court didn't hesitate. That night, I sat at my laptop and methodically deleted every digital trace of my life with them. Photos, emails, letters I'd never sent. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about refusing to honor a past they never deserved. As I finished, the doorbell rang again. On the mat was a single plain envelope. No return address. Inside was a letter from the North Carolina Women's Advocacy Collective. They invited me to speak at a closed retreat for survivors of domestic psychological abuse. The house felt different now, still, but not empty. It was mine again. The next morning, I drove to a small lake just outside Beacon Hills. And I knelt at the water's edge and placed a small stone I'd brought with me onto the soft earth. Engraved on it was a single word. Still, it wasn't a funeral. It was a goodbye to the woman I had been forced to be. 3 days later, I stood at a microphone in a room full of women, my voice catching only for a second. "I'm not here to tell you how to heal," I began, my words finding their strength. "I'm here to tell you you're not crazy." Across the room, heads nodded. A woman mouthed the words, "Thank you." That night back home, I sat on the couch where I once lay, hollowed out and broken. I opened my blog, not the anonymous one, but the one with my name, my face. I wrote the truth with a full breath and no trembling. They called it a fall. I called it a beginning. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence is not the absence of truth. Sometimes it's the space where truth gathers its strength. To anyone who has ever been made to doubt their own reality, to second-guess their own pain, you are not alone. What they call dramatic, is survival. What they dismiss as an overreaction, you feel in your bones, is a warning. Trust that feeling. I didn't share my story for revenge. I shared it because healing doesn't happen in hiding. It happens when one voice finally says, "Me too," and another replies, "I believe you." I used to think strength meant staying quiet to keep the peace. Now I know true strength is knowing your truth, owning it, and knowing when to let it burn down the world that was built on your silence.